What is up, my Squirtleites? It is I, your king, welcoming you to the July 2024 edition of Let's Talk. And first things first, before I do anything else, I want to apologize for putting out the schedule so late. It actually went up just as this video did, so if you're watching this, you can go check that out. It's not like you're missing much, though, because this schedule is actually kind of uneventful. There's not really anything changing from last month. All of these series are kind of holding pat. I mean, the earliest that any of the current Let's Plays are ending is in August, so pretty much just expect a lot of the same. We were going to have, obviously, a different Spotlight game this month, but that's pretty much the only thing that's going to be changing. And then there is one other variety video, which I actually haven't even made either of those as of the time I'm recording this Let's Talk. So, oops, I hope I can make the deadlines on those games, but we will certainly see. Other than that, though, everything's the same. We still got Destiny Beyond Light. We still got Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Rescue Team. We've still got Animal Crossing, New Horizons, and we still have Mario Party 3. And, you know, I was hoping I could come up with some grand excuse as to why I didn't have the schedule out in time. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't. It just kind of passed me by, and I completely forgot about it because June was such a whirlwind. My goodness. I wanted to call June sort of my month off. It was supposed to be my time to sort of sit down, enjoy the new Destiny expansion, take a lot of time for myself, and just sort of breathe after 5 nonstop months of heavy-duty recording after the holidays that ended last year, and it just kind of didn't end up turning out that way. It was, I would call it less of a month off and more of like a hangover month where I sort of tried to get back into things and not really anything worked, and it was just sort of a pain in the ass and a mess in every regard, and even the whole thing with the Destiny expansion didn't go exactly as planned and ended up being busier in certain areas than I was hoping to, and yeah, it was just kind of a mess of a month. And honestly, July's not going to be a whole lot better. There's a very good reason for that, though. It's because I'm gearing up towards something that's at the very end of the month, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind. It's been a crazy past few weeks, and also simultaneously not a crazy past few weeks. And it's both been partially unproductive and just straight up defeating in certain areas. Some things just haven't gone my way. There were 2 things that I wanted to try to work on over the course of the month, one of which I did get done. I did finally get Banjo-Kazooie finished. That Let's Play is over and done with, although I'm going to definitely have to work some editing magic on a few things when I get around to actually doing that. That's obviously going to replace Mario Party 3 in August. And the other thing I was going to try to work on over the course of June was the next Pokemon Let's Play, and that didn't go well at all. In fact, I'm pretty much back to square one with that, and I'm hoping to give it another go this coming weekend, but that remains to be seen if that's going to work out. Not spoiling what it is. I still don't even remember if I have already spoiled what the next Pokemon game is, but just on the off chance that I haven't said anything, I'm not going to spoil it here. And let's just say that I have given this, oh my gosh, 3-4 attempts now, where I have made it several episodes into the Let's Play and haven't been happy with it and given it the old reset and started all over from scratch. And I have spent weeks trying to get this Let's Play rolling, and it just has not been going well at all. So I'm probably just going to end up winging this thing and doing not the bare minimum, but just enough where I feel comfortable with this and I'm actually happy with it going out, because so far I have not been at all. And I think you guys will understand when you actually watch the Let's Play, or at least hear my intro to the Let's Play, because this game is one I have a very interesting relationship with. Not that it's bad or anything. This is a Pokemon game I actually like a lot. It's just, There's certain Pokemon games that I have just the most insane, intimate knowledge with them, and I know everything like the back of my hand, and I've played these Pokemon games dozens of times over, so they've got this very particular spot in my mind where I can't forget certain things about them because they formed such core memories in my brain. And then there are other Pokemon games where I just have no idea what I'm doing at all. Like, I know the core conceit of Pokemon, and that is the extent of my knowledge. And this is one of those games, so it's going to be weird in that regard. I feel kind of the same way with the Mystery Dungeon games. I think the only reason I was a bit more confident with Rescue Team Director's Cut is because Red Rescue Team was that kind of was a core memory in and of itself, in that it was my first ever Let's Play, and so I remember a lot about that one. But not a lot of other games have that or occupy that space in my head, so it's a little bit of a special case. A lot of the future Pokemon games we're going to cover on this channel are going to get weird because I've pretty much gone over the ones that I'm the most familiar with. I mean, if you know me, it's Gen 1, Gen 3, and Gen 5. Those are the generations I have the most history with, the most affinity for, and everything else, I certainly know them, but I do not have the same confidence that I do with Gens 1, Gens 3, and Gens 5. So we'll see how this goes. I really hope this goes well. I'm going to give it the rest of this month, give it more shots for the rest of the month, and if it doesn't end up turning out well, then I might have to change plans, but hopefully if I do, none of you will be any of the wiser because I'm, again, hoping I didn't spoil it. If I did, just keep it to yourselves, please. Don't tell anybody. I'd like to keep it a little bit of a secret, especially because there was a point not too long ago, actually, where I said quite definitively that I would never be Let's Playing this game, so I would really like to keep this on the down low, at least for the time being. But I want to push into August, actually, for a little bit, because, first of all, I'm not going to be putting out a Let's Talk in August. There's a very good reason for that, and that's because on July 31st, I am taking off for a vacation and will not be back until August the 14th. So that's 2 entire weeks, 15 days where I'm not going to have any opportunities to get anything done, recorded. So as far as the Spotlight game for August, I'm going to have to do that ahead of time. As far as, I mean, making Let's Talk at that point is going to be pretty much pointless, especially because, like I said, August isn't going to be changing too much from July. There'll be a couple of things ending. Actually, I think just one thing ending in August. But other than that, it's going to be mostly the same, and I want to save a lot of the big surprises for the rest of the year for September. So I'm just going to forgo that Let's Talk entirely. You guys won't be getting an update that month. You'll get your next one in September, and we'll just keep trucking along. When I get back, my immediate priority is going to be Mario Party 4, as well as Eco. And the reason I want to specifically focus on those games is because I want to have every upload slot pretty much good to go and ready for the rest of the year and beyond, at least through the new year. Except for one series and one series only, and that is, of course, Animal Crossing New Horizons, which I recorded about half of and have stopped completely going back to like the end of March. And I want to pretty much focus solely on Animal Crossing whenever I get back to it. So I've taken a long break from it. I've been giving it time to simmer. I want to get ahead on it, but I want to have everything else in order before I return to Animal Crossing, and then I can focus on finishing out that Let's Play, which still has a very long ways to go. I have a lot of work to do, but I think inside of maybe a month, month and a half tops, I could probably get it done. And then I can start focusing on everything else that I haven't even talked about yet on the channel. So that's pretty much the goal right now. August, try to get Eco and Mario Party done. Both of those are not super long games, so I should be able to get those done within the last 2 weeks. Also be returning to the same schedule that I was operating under for the first half of the year. So that'll actually make me a lot more productive than I've been this last month and than I will be this month. So that's nice at the very least. But right now I'm just locked down, kind of prepping for the trip and trying to record things in the middle whenever I have the time. But yeah, that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to go over channel update-wise in this Let's Talk. If that's all you're here for, you are free to go, because the rest of this video is going to be dedicated to sort of a mini review, or I guess more of an off-the-cuff, unscripted review of Destiny 2: The Final Shape, which I'm sure a lot of people don't have interest in, so you can go. But people have asked me about it and do want to know my thoughts on it, and I would like to give those thoughts, especially now that I've given it a few weeks to sort of simmer down and take stock on the whole situation and go over what I think of the expansion versus my initial impressions, which were very different, because that happens a lot when you're excited for a thing and it leaves a good impression and you're immediately like, oh, this is the best thing ever. But then as time wears on and, you know, you spend a little bit more time with it and you start to really let it all sink in, especially with a game like Destiny where everything has a very long tail to it content-wise, and you're expected to stay on that tail even after you've gone through the meat of it long ago. I feel like that's when things really start to take shape. And that has sort of changed my perspective on everything, at least a little bit. I'm not about to shit on the expansion or anything, but I do want to give my honest thoughts on it for everybody to hear from in case anybody was interested, because I know people were asking me about it, and I'd like to take the time to do that. So rest of this video is going to be a Destiny review. You don't care about that, you're free to go. All right, first things first, let's talk about the reception to Destiny 2 The Final Shape right off the bat, because I want to address that, because I am very aware of the public consciousness when it comes to Destiny and how much people hate this game and loathe everything about it, and are probably at least a little bit curious, or at the very least frustrated, by the fact that The Final Shape is actually being received incredibly well. It has very good reviews, was getting 9 and 10s out of 10s across the board. It has one of the highest Metacritic and OpenCritic scores of the year of any video game, and it is easily the highest in Destiny's history. So is this thing a masterpiece? Did this thing land the final blow? Was this the perfect send-off to 10 years of Destiny and a perfect setup for the next however many years of Destiny? Is it all of those things and more? And I want to tell you right now that, I mean, I guess. I'm not about to come in here and tell you, oh man, The Final Shape, as much as I love Destiny, and I do, I am willing to fully admit now that Destiny sits very firmly in my top 5 video games of all time. There have just been too many wonderful experiences with this game, too many moments with friends and people I don't even know, and, you know, from PvP to PvE, head to toe, from the beginning of Destiny 1 all the way through to now. There's just too much history I have with that game, too much love I have for all the things that Destiny has done to not consider it one of my favorite games of all time. I'll stand by that till the day I die, 100%. I mean, you know, other games could obviously surpass it in the future, but I will still always stand by that these 10 years of Destiny have been wonderful. There have certainly been ups and downs, no doubt about that, and I have certainly had my moments of frustration that has gone from mild to severe along the way, but as an overall experience, I love Destiny. I absolutely love it. And I will be the first to tell you that I do not think that The Final Shape is deserving of 9s and 10s. I'm not saying those reviews are wrong, because it's their reviews and their opinions, and I'm not going to tell people their opinions are wrong. But I ain't giving this thing a 9 out of 10. I don't hate it. I'll say that also. This is certainly not Lightfall. It's a lot better than Lightfall. But I've been sitting here, kind of sitting back after finishing everything that the campaign has to offer, and certain endgame things, and going through the raid, and all these additional things, and I've been sitting back and thinking to myself, do I really think that this is all the best stuff that Destiny has ever done? And I just can't say yes to that in even the slightest regard, because a lot of these things are super cool upon first impression. A lot of these things feel immediately like, once you play them, you're like, oh man, Bungie nailed this. But then you start to feel the long-term effects of a lot of these decisions, and you start to realize, oh, hold on, there's a lot of issues here. And it's interesting because, you know, for the short-term player, for the guy who's just going to come in, get the expansion, play through the campaign, and be done, this expansion's practically perfect. I mean, this is where I think a lot of those 9s and 10s are geared, because most people don't know life Destiny. Most people don't know life any game, or they have a specific game that they know life, and they'll come to Destiny to check it out for a little while and then dip, right? Especially with The Final Shape, where the impression and the desire for a lot of players was to just play through it to see the conclusion to this story so they never have to touch Destiny again, right? That was the initial idea for a lot of people, especially having been burned so many times along the way that they just wanted to be done with this franchise, and this was kind of a way out. I certainly didn't come into it with that impression. I'm not a no-lifer per se, but I would say I'm probably like one step below that, where I've put in thousands of hours into this game over the course of 10 years. Thousands. I have played a lot of Destiny. I certainly know people that have played way more Destiny than me, but I've played a lot of it. And I am very invested in it in pretty much all aspects, from gameplay to the loot, to the story, to the lore, to what is going on behind the scenes with Bungie and how well they're treating their staff and the developers and all those sorts of things. I care very deeply about this franchise, but I also acknowledge a lot of its shortcomings. And I guess I can just go step by step as far as each thing in the expansion. I'm not going to necessarily touch upon the sandbox stuff and the current state of the game stuff, because none of that is really relevant to what The Final Shape is as a piece of content. That is all stuff for a later discussion, and possibly even beyond that, although I will touch upon a few gripes of mine towards the end that is kind of important to my perspective as a whole. So first things first, let's talk about the campaign. Immediately, the impression with the Final Shape campaign was that it's the best thing that Destiny has ever had. It's the best campaign Bungie's ever done. They somehow managed to top everything else they've ever created. This campaign is perfect. And within the context of Destiny as a story, I can see why people think that way. And I will be the first to say that I unapologetically refer to the Final Shape campaign as the Avengers Endgame of Destiny. In so many ways, not just in the final mission, which was literally build and set up and almost plagiarizingly close to copying the final fight scene in Avengers Endgame. Like, dead serious. Go watch that cutscene. It is clearly taking inspiration from that. And I'm not saying that it wasn't earned, because you keep a game around long enough and you build up enough story elements over that time period. I think they did earn a grand finale in that regard. But man, do they sure ape a lot of tropes from Avengers Endgame. And you want to know what Avengers Endgame is to me all these years later? That is the best final act in popcorn movie cinema ever. But all of the hours and time leading up to that final act is a mediocre movie at best. And that is exactly how I feel about the Final Shape. Now, not entirely. I didn't think it was all mediocre. There were moments in the Final Shape campaign that were excellent. Absolutely excellent. The return of Cayde 6, which I initially was super not happy about, because I'm like, oh my gosh, they're dipping into this well again to bring this character back, because they know that his presence is the only thing that can truly carry a meaningful story moment, because everybody loves Nathan Fillion. And don't get me wrong, I love him too. I think he is fantastic, and when Cayde was used correctly, a la Taken King, not other moments in Destiny's history, he was fantastic. He really did carry the very first great expansion that Destiny ever put out, and kept having to carry them over and over just because of how important he was to the story. The way he was implemented in the Final Shape was by far the strongest thing about it, because they didn't do it in a way where, oh man, the funny man is back, we need to make the jokes and have the levity to carry this super dour moment. No, they did not do that at all. They actually let Nathan Fillion's strengths come out again, let his acting chops carry the story and the delivery, and really sort of made all of the most important and best moments of the story rest on his shoulders. Not in a, oh my god, Nathan Fillion, please save us from our terrible writing sort of way, more in a, this is some of our best writing, now let's let quite possibly the best character delivered by one of the best voice actors. Not saying the other voice actors are bad, mind you, but letting one of the best voice actors that we've ever used in this franchise elevate it. You know what I mean? And whenever you got those moments, there's, in fact, my favorite mission in the entire Final Shape isn't actually in the campaign. There is an exotic mission that comes shortly after the campaign. It's meant to be something you do once the campaign ends, but before that final mission, Excision, came out. It was technically an exotic quest, but normally exotic quests are these like timed challenges, like combat arena challenges, where you have to platform through something really quickly, get to a boss, and then beat the boss in a time limit. That's usually how exotic missions are. This one was different. It was billed more as like a story experience, and it was about the character of Cayde 6 passing the torch to his protege. That mission was my favorite in the entire expansion, because it was just this sort of intimate, quiet moment interspersed with good Destiny gameplay and combat between Nathan Fillion's character and this other character who's also gotten a lot of great build-up over the course of Destiny, and just sort of let the two of them just chew the scenery the entire time. And it was one of those missions where instead of it rushing you along, like urgency, we gotta go, we gotta stop the witness, it was more of a, hey, this is just the thing we're doing, and these are the objectives, and go do them at your own pace, and then we'll take moments to have a little minute of respite and talk here and there, and things like that. Things where they really let the characters actually shine and just sort of be themselves without trying to be too jokey. That, I think, was the best example of what they did right with the Final Shape, was those kind of character moments. That mission was fantastic. If you don't know what exactly I'm referring to still, it's the mission where you get the Still Hunt exotic sniper rifle. Fantastic mission. Loved everything about it. Loved the writing in that. And there were moments like that mission in the actual campaign itself, too. There's a mission where you're going up this, like, snowy mountain for most of it. And there's, like, this one part in the middle of that mission where Cayde just kind of calls you over and says, hey, have a seat with me. We need to talk about this. That was a great moment. I loved that. That was, to me, one of the most memorable moments of the campaign, because I was like, man, this is where Bungie's writers and the voice acting chops of the people that they've hired for this game, this is where they truly shine, is when they have moments like this. Not when they have their super big desperation moments where everybody's trying to put on tons of anger and frustration and be like, oh man, the world is ending and we got to put a stop to it. And I never feel the urgency in those moments. And it has nothing to do with the voice actors themselves. They do a fantastic job. It's just usually within the pacing and the context of these stories, it doesn't quite work. Now, my biggest issue with the Final Shape campaign, and I don't know if anybody else caught onto this, but I'm going to say pretty much the same thing that I've said with any other Destiny campaign, and that's the fact that it doesn't have great pacing. A big problem with a lot of Destiny campaigns, even before they overhauled the whole campaign system with Witch Queen and started making them a lot better, and they actually repeated this issue with Lightfall, a lot of these campaigns feel like a first act, part of a second act, no payoff to that second act, and no build up for the third act before it just comes to an end. That's how almost all Destiny campaigns feel structured. It's like, okay, we're setting the stage, things are happening, we're about to build up, oh, it's over. That's how so many Destiny campaigns feel. Even the Taken King sort of felt that way to a point, although it did have a little bit of fluff and it chewed on the scenery just enough to be less egregious in that regard. But Lightfall and Beyond Light and Forsaken and Shadowkeep and Rise of Iron, all of these have this problem. The only expansion that I can say was actually incredibly well paced was Witch Queen. That one legitimately felt like it had a first, second, and third act with a rise and a fall in each act. It had a build-up and a payoff, and then another build-up and then a payoff, and a third build-up and a payoff. The only gripe I have with that campaign is right towards the end, we get the really big reveal, and there's only one mission after that. If there had been two, I would say it was perfect, but the fact that it was like, okay, we know what the problem is, all the chips are down, let's just have one big extra long mission and try to explain everything in that final mission. Bungie has always been very bad at ending campaigns from a storytelling standpoint. They're good at it from a gameplay standpoint. They usually put really awesome missions right in the end of the campaign, except for Beyond Light. That one sucked. But they always hurry to the ending too fast. Witch Queen was the least egregious in this regard. Final Shape was no better than almost all the other campaigns. This was all build up, and then the final mission happened. And don't get me wrong, the final mission in Final Shape is fantastic. In fact, I think it is, of all the campaign missions, the best single one in the history of Destiny. Absolutely loved it. Really was a great payoff. If you played through it on Legendary difficulty, it would kick your ass. Holy crap. By far the hardest Legendary campaign mission I have ever played in Destiny. I struggled with that one mightily. Even on my second go-around, where I actually knew what to do and had everything down, I still probably died 8 or 9 times on that final boss with my best class, with my best loadout. That was tough. I mean, I actually did hear that it got a little bit easier when you were in a fire team, but from a solo experience, man, that thing kicked my ass. Very impressed by it. But the pacing was just, it was so weird. It was so weird. It was so bizarre. It didn't feel like everything was given time to marinate. There were certain missions where certain characters came out to shine. I think of the mission with Zavala's ghost in particular, who, by the way, was a fantastic character, and the voice actor portraying him did an amazing job. But the introduction and the exit for that character happened so fast that it didn't feel like enough was going on. It reminded me a lot of Rohan in the Lightfall campaign, where we were supposed to care about this character when he had this big grand death, and we just didn't have time to do it. Now, granted, the Zavala's ghost, Tarj, in the Final Shape campaign, I think was handled much, much better than Rohan. I'll say that right now. But it was still way too short. I needed 2 missions with this guy, not 1. And there was another mission where a similar circumstance happened that I felt the exact same way about. I needed 2 missions with this, not 1. It was annoying to never be introduced to this character, to then meet them in an in-between cutscene, and then in the very next mission they were gone. And I think that kind of is an example of everything that I have a problem with as far as the pacing in this campaign goes. I think it's number 2 for me. I don't think it passes Witch Queen for me. I still think that that is the bar that Bungie has set for themselves when it comes to campaign design. When it comes to variety of locations and certain other things, yes, the Final Shape beats Witch Queen in that regard because a lot of Witch Queen is in very samey locations. But when it comes to encounter design and pacing and where the actual campaign takes you, when it comes to, you know, the way the story is pushed forward in Witch Queen and told, I still think it's unmatched. I still don't think Final Shape surpassed it. I would give probably every pre-Witch Queen campaign except for the Taken King like a 5 out of 10 or below. I'd probably also give Lightfall a 5 out of 10, maybe even a 4 out of 10. But I would give the Final Shape, I'd give like the Taken King a 6. I'd give the Final Shape like a 7. And then I'd probably give Witch Queen an 8 or a 9 out of 10, if that makes sense. That's kind of where we're at in terms of what I think they've done. And this isn't me just comparing them to other Destiny campaigns. This is just like me comparing them to other first-person shooter campaigns. Like if I were to give Titanfall 2 a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, Witch Queen sits at an 8 or a 9 for me. And because I still love Titanfall 2's campaign to this day. I think it's fantastic. So that's what I think about the campaign. Then we get to Prismatic, which was another really big selling point for the Final Shape. It was billed as all your subclasses are coming together. You're going to be able to do everything and mix and match however you want to accomplish anything in the game. And that is so not what Prismatic was. I mean, Bungie was transparent with this later. They just kind of weren't in the marketing material. It was more when they actually explained what Prismatic was a few months before, or was it even a month? It might have just been a few weeks before the Final Shape came out that we really started to see what this subclass was all about. To put it simply, what they did is they kind of took the philosophy of combining all of the subclasses and then designed the subclass as though it was Destiny 1 again. Now, some people might take umbrage with me saying that, but hear me out. For the longest time, when it came to subclass design, there was a very strict identity between classes and what they did. Destiny 1 was extremely strict in this regard, and vanilla Destiny 2 was even almost more strict in this regard. You got this specific grenade if you were on Solar Warlock. You got this specific grenade if you were on Solar Hunter, and you got this specific grenade if you were on Solar Titan. You could make changes between them, like you could switch, but you were very much hamstrung into playing with a certain set style depending on your subclass and your class. Then, a few years into Destiny 2, they decided to do away with most of that, make certain things class exclusive, but allow overlap. So really the only thing that became exclusive to your class on a certain subclass was like a subclass aspect and how your exotics could play into that subclass. And then, of course, your super. Other than that, pretty much everything else was shared across classes. Like Hunters, Warlocks, and Titans could all use healing grenades, and could all use trip mine grenades, and could all use thermite grenades. Like, none of that was a thing that was exclusive anymore. You could sort of spec into what certain classes were doing, even though there was always supposed to be this quote-unquote class identity of Warlocks being the summoners and the healers, or Titans being sort of the wall, the tank, if you will, while Hunters were more of the solo-friendly, high-damage options, but they were sort of like glass cannons. That was the idea, right? The problem is that there were so many different ways to mess with a subclass that every class had options to circumvent, that there really wasn't an identity. A very good example of this was Strand Warlock, okay? So Strand Warlock was really supposed to be themed around summoning these things called Threadlings, where not only would they have access to the grenade, which all three classes had, where you could toss these little guys out there. They were almost like little worms that would seek out things and kill them. But you could also consume the grenade to get more of them, and there'd be sort of a legion that would float around you and attack things as you shot at them, or you could just unleash them with a cast of your Rift. You also got an exotic that would let you eat even more of these. The Tangles that you created with the Strand subclass would also create more Threadlings. You had all these different options, while Hunters were supposed to be more mobility-based, so they got a second grapple charge and they can move around more, and Titans were supposed to be more of the Suspend class, the crowd control that kind of keeps everything in a specific area while they just unleash torrents of damage in that space. Except the Hunters could greatly encroach on the Warlock's class identity because that double grenade that allowed them to grapple more could technically also be used to get double the amount of Threadling grenades. And they also got a subclass aspect that allowed them to create like a clone of themselves that when that clone exploded, it would create more Threadlings. And suddenly, you're actually able to make more summons, quote unquote, with the Hunter than you were supposed to be able to with the Summoner class. And so all of this overlap caused a lot of frustration with people because they're like, okay, where is my class identity? Well, with Prismatic, Bungie's decision was to go, okay, no, you are only going to play this way, and there is nothing you can do about it. You get this grenade from this subclass, this grenade from this subclass, and you cannot choose. Good example. Now only Warlocks can use the Threadlings with Prismatic. Now only Titans can use the grapple grenade, or sorry, the shackle grenade to suspend things with Prismatic. And only Hunters can grapple around and slingshot themselves to places. So you see where they finally took this idea of, no, we're going back to you have to play this way, right? This is the way that was designed for your Prismatic subclass, and you cannot budge it at all. You do have your fragments, but that is pretty much the only thing that is ubiquitous across all three subclasses. Otherwise, you're railroaded into this. And that sounds great and all, and they talked about all these different synergies. Like a popular one was, or at least going into the launch before people actually got to play around with it, was Titans. So Titans could summon all these stasis crystals all over the place, which themselves would crowd control things because if they walked into them, they'd be frozen, or if they shattered, they would cause explosions. But on top of that, you also had access to the solar ability, which is known as Consecration, where you can do this little like slide, and then you bring your fists up and they're all caught on fire, and then you slam them into the ground and a wave of fire shoots out in front of you. Now, the synergy with this, obviously, is the stasis crystals go out and the fire goes out. The fire not only catches everything on fire in front of you, but it also explodes the stasis crystals, causing an even bigger explosion, and all this chains together to just completely wipe a room with massive damage, right? Well, first of all, that interaction didn't even work correctly when the game launched, so there was a big bug in that regard where the solar wouldn't even break the crystals, which was stupid. But on top of that, once it was actually used in practice, it was like, okay, this is cool, but what else can I do? And then you'd start to figure out the other interactions, and it wasn't much. Another good example was Hunter. And I'm not saying these aren't powerful, by the way. I'm just saying it was incredibly limiting. So you go to the Hunter one, and Hunter has access to the grapple. They also have the Arc Punch. And the Arc Punch is a staple of Destiny 2. It is one of the easiest ability loops that you can use in all of Destiny 2 and has existed since the game came out. And for the Arc Hunter Punch, the way it works is a punch kill heals you. If you dodge, after that, you get that punch back, and then you can punch the next thing. But here's the catch. Once you've killed something with that punch, the damage increases for a small duration on a timer. It's 20 seconds. You then punch another thing, and then that damage buff stacks to ×2, and the timer resets, and you get healed. So it's just this sort of loop of punch, dodge, stronger punch, dodge, strongest punch, dodge, and then you can just continuously use that strongest punch to wipe the room and also keep yourself topped off. You can also add chain lightning to it that synergizes a little bit. You can get an exotic that makes that second follow-up punch even stronger and also gives you a chunk of health on top of health regeneration. Very, very strong combat loop. I have soloed many a dungeon to this day using just that synergy right there. Well, they added it to Prismatic, but on top of that, you have that grapple, and you're also given access to something called Flawless Execution, which is a Void subclass ability, and that ability is whenever you kill something with a Void debuff, you go invisible, and for a brief duration, you can actually see things through walls and also punch things to make them super weak. So you see what I'm talking about here? You get the loop. So you add the Arc Punch on top of Flawless Execution, so not only are you getting a stronger punch and heals, you're also going invisible, which allows you to just straight up escape the danger until you're ready to re-engage. And if you want to move about the battlefield even faster, you couple all of that with your grapple ability. This all sounds amazing, right? It's really strong. It's also practically the only thing hunters have access to that they don't already have on other subclasses, because again, you're sort of just railroaded into this playstyle. You get what I mean? There's a clear strongest thing that each class has access to, where using anything else is kind of stupid. It really is. And not to mention, you've got these new supers that came out with it, right? Now, the Warlock one is excellent. It's fantastic. It's arguably even better than Well of Radiance, which has been a staple on Warlocks for years in group content. But It does insane damage, insane ability regen, keeps everybody topped off and with a damage boost. It's fantastic. Great rework of the old Radiance ability from Destiny 1. The Hunter and the Titan one, on the other hand. Now, the Titan one is still decent, but man, does it not hold a candle to earlier supers, especially with certain exotic synergies. Like the Burning Maul Slam with those exotic gauntlets that make it do massive damage. It's got nothing on that. Thunder Crash, it's got nothing on that. There's even the Strand one is way stronger if used properly than this new one. It's cool. It looks awesome, and the little axes you can run around with, that's interesting. But when used in anything that's semi-serious, it really doesn't pack a punch. And the Arc one on Hunter, okay, awesome in PvP because you're literally unkillable when you use it. Like, I have never been more infuriated by a super, nor have I ever felt more like a cheat code when using a super than I do with that one in PvP. But in PvE, it hits like a wet noodle. It is one of the worst supers I have ever seen. It is somehow as bad as the severely neglected and, in fact, greatly nerfed Spectral Blades that used to be actually semi-decent and was always excellent in PvP, that because it was so good in PvP, they nerfed it so hard that it's super irrelevant, and this launched almost as bad as that. It's cool in execution. It's got this awesome animation. You zip to a spot, do a whirlwind, and then everything around you vaporizes, right? Except the damage is so weak that sometimes it can't even kill, major enemies. You know what I mean? Which, it's a super, and you only get 3 uses of it before it's gone. You throw it 3 times, you move 3 times, you're done with it. And it's just for as much of a power fantasy as I want to get out of this, we are this far into the game's life cycle, and you're still shipping supers that are this bad, especially when you go back and you look at how the Strand supers shipped, and all of them were excellent. Actually, the Titan one was the worst one, and for all intents and purposes, it's still like a middle-of-the-road super when it comes to everything it's capable of. It's just that the Warlock and the Hunter ones were so strong that the Titan one felt neglected by comparison. With Prismatic, these supers are so bad that it almost makes me want to go back to literally anything else. I mean, I can tell you right now, everyone on Hunter is just using Golden Gun on Prismatic. And I can say that with complete confidence. It doesn't just have to do with the fact that Golden Gun is super powerful right now. It's just better. It's just so much easier to use. It's better. It does everything that the Arc one could ever want to do and more. It's great for boss damage. It's just there's no reason to use this new stuff. So all of this is to say that I don't think Prismatic is all it's hyped up to be. I actually don't like using it very much. I think it's okay, but you have to play such an extremely specific way with Prismatic to justify it that it's not fun for me. And I'm sure people are going to come out of the woodworks, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? I did, guys. I did. I play pretty high-level endgame stuff a lot. I really do. And it's not that there aren't other combinations in Prismatic that work. It's just that there's always a better alternative on the other light and dark subclasses than using that. The only reason to use Prismatic is in its absolute best state, its absolute most overpowered state, where you've got all these synergies, but you can only play the game one way. Even with a lot of light and dark subclasses, yes, you are designed, it's a build, right? It's a build. You are supposed to play it in a very set circumstance where you're doing things in order to succeed and make that build the best that it can be, right? The thing is generally with light and dark subclass builds, there's also a lot of flexibility in how you want to use your weapon loadout depending on the content, whether you want to go for boss damage, or whether you're doing raiding or dungeons, or you're doing GM Nightfalls, or you're just doing basic fuck around content, you know what I mean? And so it's not just that you have your subclass build, you also have your weapon builds that complement all of this. Prismatic doesn't really work that way because there isn't a lot of synergy to it. It allows you to change things on your armor, but Prismatic is Prismatic. A lot of the things about Prismatic is designed to work in the context of Prismatic, not in the context of your weapons, unless those weapons specifically are benefited by Prismatic. And that really only applies to a few exotics. It doesn't really apply to the rest of the weapon roster. And again, being railroaded into playing this such a specific way, and like so minutely specific that there is no room to, wiggle around with that, you don't really have a lot of options with your weapons. You have to do something specific. Like, again, I'll go back to Hunter, okay? How is everybody playing Prismatic on Hunter right now? Well, they are speccing into a lot of sustain abilities, so you do get a lot of that punch loop, although instead of going with something like Liar's Handshake, they're opting for Celestial Nighthawk because Golden Gun is really strong right now. So it's punch things a lot to gain super energy as fast as you can, heal, stay alive, that's pretty much it. You're just punch, dodge, punch, dodge, punch, dodge. Big enemy, okay, maybe use some weapons, and then punch, dodge, right? You punch when it's necessary, you use a strong primary when it's not going to help you at all, and that's really your whole loop. All you're doing is building up super as fast as you can, because once you have that Golden Gun, and also once you have your Still Hunt stacks up so you can use that as a second Golden Gun, then it's about just damage dumping. That's all the loop is. That's all Hunter is about on Prismatic right now. There's nothing else to it. It is the most powerful thing in the game right now, and it's boring as shit. It is so not fun to play that way because you've got no variety. You've got no moments where you're like, oh, maybe I could actually opt to do this, or maybe it's time for me to switch to my heavy. But no, you have a very set way you have to play right now, and if you deviate from that at all, you are not only not being optimal, you're actually being detrimental, and you might as well be playing something else. You might as well go back to Solar as opposed to playing Prismatic, because then you can actually play a very different loop where instead of having to focus on this ability loop, you can actually just heal yourself and then use a solar weapon to kill things, and the heals just come naturally because that's the way Restoration is designed. And it's so much better because Prismatic does not want you to play that way. It wants you to play the way Prismatic is designed to play. And yeah, I'm not a big fan of it. I think I went on about Prismatic long enough. You get the idea. That was a lot to talk about. What do I think of the Pale Heart of the Traveler, where the entirety of the final shape takes place? What do I think of this location? I think it is okay. There are aspects of this area that are really freaking cool in terms of its design. But there are other things about it that I really, really don't like. And maybe it's just a little bit of cognitive bias, especially with the way things are right now, but as you get into some of the deeper, freakier areas, there was some things that Bungie mentioned when it came to the art design of this place that they were like, oh yeah, we want it to feel uncanny and unnatural, and like a lot of this stuff is an imitation of the real thing as opposed to being the real thing, because it's kind of the way the Traveler designs these spaces. They're supposed to be familiar yet different. And in a lot of the earlier areas, I think this worked well. I loved the Traveler's sort of the aesthetic of being this sort of paradise that you're in. You know what I mean? Where it is this kind of hallowed ground, humbling experience to be within it, and you get a lot of that, especially in the starter areas. But as you start to get later into the campaign, as you start to get into some of the deeper and darker and dingier areas, you're supposed to see a lot of this horror imagery. And some of that stuff sticks very well upon going through it for the first time, but as I start to go through it again and again, I can't help but feel how ugly all of these spaces are. And I think a lot of that has to do, and this is where the cognitive bias comes in, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, man, some of these spaces really do feel like they were designed by AI. I know that's intentional. I know that was very intentional on the developer's part, and it probably does speak a lot to what they did that I can't actually tell apart whether they straight up design the spaces as is to feel that way, or they actually let an AI do it. But I also think that's part of my problem with it, because I think AI design spaces are hideous as all hell, and I think they've got such anti-personality to them that they are actually quite repulsive. And despite Bungie trying to go for that, it almost makes me hate some of the spaces that this campaign and the Pale Heart has within it, where I just don't even want to be there. There is a specific loading zone, and then there's like a whole offshoot area from another loading zone that I just never venture into because I'm just like, no, this place sucks. It's awful here, and I'm bored as hell while I'm here because everything is just so dim and dour to look at, and it's not nice. But then the other areas, by contrast, are awesome. So I'm kind of hit and miss on this location. I will say this. As far as all of the landing zones we've gotten for the past little while, it probably is the best. I think I do like it more than Savathûn's Throne World, but only a little bit more. I definitely like it more than Neomuna. I could not stand that as a play space. I still hate Neomuna, and unless the game forces me to go back there, I probably never will. But I don't know if I like it as much as something like the Dreaming City or possibly even Europa. Maybe a little more than Europa just because that can get a bit samey, but like I don't think they can top the Dreaming City, man, or even the Tangled Shore. Like these are some spaces that were so memorable and so uniquely Destiny in their design, and the Pale Heart is that. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely is that. But only for like half of it. And then the other half of it just kind of makes me hate it, if you can get what I'm saying. I know this is a very personal bias for sure. I'm sure a lot of other people don't see it the same way I do or aren't as turned off by it as I am. But there's just some of it that it got to me too much and I just didn't like it. There were some spaces where it was like, this is an imitation to the point where it isn't even flattering anymore. It's just kind of grotesque and almost like they're plagiarizing themselves, which is what AI is kind of designed to do. Even if somebody is using it on their own stuff, it feels like they're plagiarizing themselves in the worst way. And that's what part of this space felt like, which on top of that, I should say, as far as the actual gameplay loop and like playing in this space when it comes to the Pathfinder objectives and the many missions, the Pale Heart's excellent. It's a fantastic space to play in. It's one of the most engaging and exciting patrol zones ever. Certainly the best since the Dreaming City, and possibly even better than the Dreaming City in that regard. There's like a persistent public event that plays the entire time and can be done completely solo, which this is my favorite thing about the Pale Heart. It is no longer an open online play space anymore, because up to this point in Destiny, if you landed in a play space, very high chance that you would run into somebody else who was also playing in that instance. All instances were public in all patrol spaces in Destiny from the vanilla Destiny 1 all the way up through Lightfall. But in specifically the Final Shape, they allowed us to opt in to public spaces where otherwise these instances are always private. And I love that. Absolutely love that. I can play at my own leisure. I can engage with things and activate stuff whenever I want to. I am never railroaded into something because some idiot in the same area decided they wanted to do years-old content that I want nothing to do with, and their content activates and thus disables whatever I'm working on because they can't have two things running in the same play space and stupid stuff like that. I'm just glad all that's gone. It's never a worry anymore. When I'm playing in the Pale Heart, it's my area. It's nobody else's. I enjoy that a lot. And if I want to get help, if I want to go through things faster, if I want to play with people, there's always an option for that. And you're constantly being rewarded with certain things. There's an excellent reward loop to this. A lot of the new weapons in the Pale Heart of the Traveler are fantastic. There's this new exotic special sword that can roll with like combinations of exotic perks. That's really freaking awesome. And there's so much exciting stuff to go after in the Pale Heart that it does make me want to play for hours and hours and hours on end and see what I come out with on the other side, because I feel like I'm constantly being rewarded for my time. And usually in a patrol space, that's never the thing. Usually patrol spaces are a means to an end. They aren't the end themselves. But this time around, they finally are. And that also has to do with the Pathfinder objectives. Now, the Pathfinder itself was kind of a restructuring and how Bungie rewards players with gear that actually allows them to level up, as opposed to doing a lot of the menial tasks or having to go do strikes and Crucible and Gambit and all that stuff, which a lot of people don't want to engage with, just to get better gear. Now they can actually just run around the Pale Heart and complete very specific objectives that are kind of randomized. And a lot of those objectives are quite painless, but they're definitely things that you kind of want to go out of your way to do, and they're sort of things you can do while you're doing other things. And that's a really engaging system that I like a lot. The problem with it is that they then took the Pathfinder system and implemented it in other places in the game. Now, it works perfectly within the context of the Pale Heart. It doesn't work in the context of anything else in the game whatsoever, least of all Vanguard, Crucible, and Gambit. It is the stupidest implementation I have ever seen. Now, this is more of a live game problem. This is certainly something that could change down the road in the future. But holy hell, I have never been more turned off by engaging with any of that stuff than I have with the Pathfinder objective. Now, usually, I'm off and on with Crucible. Depends on the meta. Sometimes I'll engage with it. Sometimes I won't touch it with a 10-foot pole because the Crucible is largely garbage, especially ever since Forsaken. It's pretty much just taken a dive off of Shadowkeep. Forsaken, I feel like, was the last good year of PvP in Destiny's history, personally. And it's just been all over the place for so many years, and sometimes I'll play it for a while, and other times I'm just like, I can't be bothered. Gambit, I don't play anymore, haven't in years. But Strikes, I like to play from time to time, all the time pretty much. I mean, it's not like I want to jump on and play them every day, but I'm always down to run them because they're pretty painless, and it's like the most mindless running around and shooting stuff that you could ever do. And honestly, that's where Destiny shines at its best, because running around and shooting stuff is what Destiny does better than any other FPS I've ever played. And that is the main reason I'm hooked on the game to this day. Now, I don't want to play any of that stuff because the Pathfinder system has completely railroaded all of those activities into this stupid, you have to play this certain way system that literally does not work. It's fundamentally broken. It will go from like, okay, you have some options here. Do you want to get 20 kills with bows in a strike? Do you want to get 20 void kills? Or do you want to get 100 kills on volatile enemies in the Crucible, which will probably take you like 700 matches to do, because getting volatile kills, or any debuff kill specifically in the Crucible, takes ages. It is so stupid. It is so stupid. And a lot of times, because the Pathfinder is like a pyramid system where the number of objectives you're allowed to complete gets smaller and smaller along the way, you will oftentimes run into lines where you literally cannot progress without doing some extremely asinine Gambit or Crucible objective along the way. And it's just completely killed it. Now, it would be one thing if these objectives were extremely simple, like dunk 20 motes in Gambit, or win a Gambit match. I don't even like that one. I don't even like that one because matchmaking can be so asinine. Even that can get frustrating sometimes, and you just have no control over your teammates. I would say more like play 3 Gambit matches, right? Or in the Crucible, get, 5 kills without dying, a single 5-kill streak or something like that. Something along those lines. If it was that, I wouldn't have a problem with this, but these are marathon objectives. These are the kinds of things where you will go into the playlist and you will come out a changed person. You will have seen God and the devil alike, and you will wonder why you ever went in there in the first place, because it is not worth it for one piece of gear that's going to level you up a little bit. It is the stupidest implementation of a system I have ever seen Bungie do since Destiny 2 vanilla, and I'm not even kidding when I say that. Now, it's not the only way you can level up. Obviously, there are other things you can do. You can do the raid. You can do just the Pathfinders on the Pale Heart if you want to. You don't really have to engage with it. But the fact that that has almost completely cut off the core playlist from the rest of the Destiny experience so harshly is almost sickening. It's like an abomination. It's like, why did you do this? You guys grafted on a malignant tumor to the game, and suddenly we can't even engage with that side lest it die. You know what I mean? That's how bad this is. So I don't know what they were thinking there. That was a horrific implementation. And yes, I do think it actually plays a part in my thoughts on the final shape as a whole because of how severe of an issue it is. Now, the last thing I'm going to touch upon, this will be the final thing. I'm not going to go, like I said, not going to go over Sandbox, not going to go into any other things. I want to talk about the raid really briefly. I'm not going to say too much about it. I'm not going to spoil encounters. I'm not going to go over any of those things. All I will say is that as far as first impressions go, this is the greatest raid in Destiny history, and I say that sincerely. Now, upon stepping back and taking stock of it and comparing it to the other raids, isn't my favorite of all time? No, I would never say that. There are just a few too many things about this raid that are way too frustrating for me to enjoy it time and time again and want to play this raid over and over. In fact, of all the raids that I've ever played, this is probably the one that, more than any, once I'm done with it, I'm like, whew, okay, let's not touch that again for a long time, because it's not that it's super hard. It is, as far as like normal difficulty raids go, it probably is the most challenging, but it's not super hard. It's just more of a figuring out the exact strategy to make this all come together and work. And once it all clicks into place, it's really not that bad. It's just that it does take a little bit of work to get there, and you have to have people that are committed to get to that point. As far as the contest mode was concerned, all the hardcore raiders will tell you this was by far the greatest challenge Bungie has ever thrown at them. They kicked the hardcore players' asses, and you know what? Good for them. Even the normal version is still pretty darn tough, but it's a good challenge. It really is good. But as far as the actual encounter design goes and what you're supposed to do in certain circumstances, I don't know if I love that very much. There's a core conceit to almost every single raid when you truly think about it. Last Wish and Vow of the Disciple, for instance, it's symbols, although Last Wish is more... it's a little more simple with its symbol system. It's more like picking out a symbol and then doing a thing with that, while Vow of the Disciple is more like a memorization of sequences of symbols a lot. With Root of Nightmares, it's about the seed running mechanic and remembering where to go. You literally just have to remember routes and things like that of that nature. Really, the only exception to that is the planets encounter in that raid. But really, the seeds is like the main conceit of that one. Just running light to light and light to light again, and then going back and forth, and learning when to fix when an issue arises in the middle of that. Deepstone's Crypts is about understanding the 3 different roles between operator and scanner and suppressor, although that third one doesn't even come up until way late in the raid anyway, and knowing how all of those work and being able to swap them between people so that everybody understands those mechanics to a point. I mean, there are definitely ways to circumvent that, so not everybody has to engage with the mechanics, but for the most part, everybody should know how the different things work in each encounter, and that's really how all that goes. And King's Fall is a lot about, sequences and telling people where to go and ferrying them to certain locations and explaining things that only you can see but they can't see. And a lot of that is baked into the encounter design. And these are kind of the core mechanics that underpin each raid. The core mechanics that underpin the final raid, Salvation's Edge, are sort of a mishmash of a few of those that kind of all come together. And honestly, I just think it all becomes really tedious. A lot of people complained about the memorization of symbols in Vow of the Disciple, and it's not quite like that egregious when it comes to just strictly memorization, but it takes a portion of that mechanic and then it bakes it into another mechanic, which is then baked into another mechanic. And it all kind of becomes so much that I almost find it a little exhausting by the time you're all done with it. Unless you blitz through the raid and get it all done super quickly, if you're only in there for like a few hours, it gets taxing, man. It really gets taxing. In fact, honestly, the easiest encounter mechanic-wise is the final one, the actual boss himself, which I think is hilarious. That is by far the least mechanic-heavy encounter in the entire raid. It's just the hardest to not die in. But then you also have the one weird encounter, which is the one before the final boss. The encounter that everybody freaked out about when the raid came out. And that thing it's too much. Like, I get it. Bungie was trying to make an encounter that was just there to fuck with everybody. But holy crap, you guys. I'll say right now, there is no way, unless you are like a super genius, there is no way to walk into that encounter every single time and just do it like go in raw. You know what I mean? You need a cheat sheet. You need a cheat sheet to do this freaking encounter. Otherwise, it is way too easy to accidentally make a big mistake and mess everything up, because there is so much that requires exact communication. And while a lot of it's very simple, if you so much as get one detail wrong, it resets the entire thing. And it's incredibly frustrating if you get those details wrong. It's a great encounter, don't get me wrong, but everybody needs to be extremely exact with their details, and you can't even misinterpret something or you're starting back from square one, and that's frustrating. Very frustrating. You have to be perfect with that encounter. And I love the idea of it, but I don't like the execution of it. So overall, Salvation's Edge is a great raid. It's great. It's thematically nice. It's very, very fun. But it's also one of the more exhausting raids, if not the most exhausting raid in the game. It's probably not one I would pick to run over and over again like I would certain other raids like Last Wish or Vow or King's Fall, which will always be my top 3, or even Deepstone Crypt for that matter. And it's also certainly not, I think, the most rewarding raid either for your time. It's just a great experience, but I think it really captures you the first go-around, and then all of the successive go-arounds, it's not nearly as exciting or as memorable or as interesting or all of those sorts of things. It kind of loses its luster faster than the other raids and doesn't stay being this incredible gameplay experience like other raids do upon the second, third, and so on playthroughs of the raid. So I think that more or less summarizes my thoughts on it as a whole. That was a lot to talk about, and like I said, it was completely unscripted, a lot to go over. Overall, I would have to say that the final shape is a solid 7.5 out of 10, maybe an 8. I do like it. I do think it's a very well done expansion. There are some great things about it. However, I'm going to say right now it's not my favorite. It is nowhere near my favorite expansion. I think as a whole, like all the content packaged together, I do like it more than Witch Queen. I think the campaign for Witch Queen beats it, but the entire package all brought together, and I actually think the raid for Witch Queen beats it too, but when you take everything else, like all the things you're going to spend your hours playing, I do think that the Final Shape does slightly edge out Witch Queen. However, it is not my favorite Destiny expansion. In fact, it isn't even my second favorite Destiny expansion. I would probably give this third, maybe fourth. I mean, honestly, you could ask me on any given day, and I don't know if I would put it over Witch Queen or not. Right now, I can say with confidence I like it more than Witch Queen, but I don't know. Maybe ask me in a month or two, and that might change. What I will never in confidence say is that I like it more than Forsaken or more than the Taken King. And I know to some people that is going to be considered blasphemous. How dare you? You have got so much nostalgia in your eyes. You have got such rose-tinted glasses. How could you possibly say these things? Well, there's a very good reason for that. When Forsaken and the Taken King came out, man, was I hooked. I was in it, man. I mean, I played through that thing. I was there for day one on the raid. I was so excited. I couldn't stop playing Destiny for months after the fact. In fact, with Forsaken in particular, I was addicted to Destiny that entire year. It really wasn't until after Shadowkeep came out and then about a season in that I actually had my first big break of Destiny for a very long time. I was so hooked on the Forsaken cycle that I loved everything about it. From the Forsaken campaign itself through to the Dreaming City stuff and everything in between, all the secrets that came with all of that. I was so enamored with what Destiny had become. That's why I truly felt as though Destiny had revived itself, despite it coming off of what I still consider to be the lowest point in Destiny, and that is not the launch of Destiny 1, it is the launch of Destiny 2. I still think that is the worst thing that this game has ever gone through, and I will stand by that to the end of the time. Far and away one of the dumbest mistakes that both Bungie and Activision have ever made in deciding that that's how the game should be now, and completely ignoring all of the success from Destiny 1, which was about 95% all the responsibility of the Taken King. Rise of Iron had its moments, the original Destiny 1 had its moments, but really, almost all of Destiny 1's legacy is because of the Taken King. That expansion was so loaded, it had such great atmospheric storytelling. It was the only time where Destiny 1 really felt like it had figured its shit out, and it just kept going and going and adding things. I mean, I have never had an expansion on its own, because also keep in mind that when the Taken King came out, nothing came after it until Rise of Iron. It had a tiny little update like 6 months later, but the actual expansion itself was all that carried players. Now, usually with a Destiny expansion, people are through all of the expansion's content and moving on into the seasonal stuff within about 2-3 weeks. I'm not even kidding when I say that. Maybe a month. With the Taken King, we were good to go for like 3 whole months before we started to get bored with all that stuff and started moving on to other things. And I mean, by 6 months, when they finally did put out more content, things were dire. But 3 entire months carried by one single expansion is still, to this day, unprecedented. So you have to understand how big of a deal that was back then, okay? That's where my memories are. Like, I was still playing this. You want to know where I'm at with the Final Shape right now? I haven't played it in 2 weeks. I haven't even touched it. I blitzed it about a week into its launch. I played it a little bit more the following week, and I haven't touched it since. And I've been thinking to myself, why is that? Why do I have no urge to engage with this gameplay anymore? I mean, because like I said, I was not of the mind that I'm going to get through the Final Shape and I'm going to see this series come to a close and never touch it again despite Bungie's best efforts. That's not where my head was at going into this, like it was for many other people. But yet, inexplicably, it almost feels like that is where my head is at right now, because I just cannot be fucked. I just cannot be bothered to care about any of this stuff, because it's like I saw all of this stuff happen, and it's like it all cascaded down, because as good as this stuff is, none of it is great enough to really keep me there. None of it is so fantastic that I'm like, oh man, I am clamoring for the next chapter. I need to know what happens next. I don't feel that way right now. And I'm sure that's going to change. I'm not going to say right now, man, I'm done with Destiny forever. Not a chance. Not a chance. In fact, there is an episode, not the current episode that we're going through, but is it the next or the one after that actually has some pretty intriguing stuff that picks up where things from both Witch Queen and the season of The Witch last year left off of, that I'm actually quite excited for, and I do want to see how all that stuff plays out. But what's going on right now in all of the post-Final Shape stuff, all the stuff you're supposed to engage with once the campaign's over, there's a lot of that I haven't touched. My character is not at max level right now, which this many weeks into an expansion is like, well, I don't think I could ever say that. And this is one of the easiest level grinds that an expansion has ever given us. And I'm still not there because I just don't care. I don't care. I cannot be bothered to care about any of this stuff because none of it is that spectacular. None of it is blowing my mind or just grabbing me and not letting go in the same way like the Taken King did, or Forsaken did, or specifically the Dreaming City side of the Forsaken expansion. Like, there's just nothing there for me to freak out about. I don't care. And I've been trying to figure out as to why that is, and I just keep coming back to the conclusion that I don't think Final Shape is as great as everybody else says it is. I think it's fine. I think it's all right. But I don't think that this is the highest point in Destiny at all. I mean, it was a good send-off, and again, going back to my Avengers Endgame analogy, it's an amazing third act in an otherwise overall mediocre package. I mean, I will be the first to tell you, I think Infinity War is far and away a better film than Endgame is. And this is coming from somebody who's not even on the Marvel train anymore. But I think back to those and I'm like, yeah, one was a way better movie, but this other movie just had this iconic impact with its ending where it just had this conclusion that everybody talks about and remembers, and that conclusion alone sort of defines everybody's feelings on the movie, when I don't think they remember that the rest of the package wasn't all that great. And that's exactly how I feel about Final Shape. It's just like it's such a great send-off. It's such a great conclusion. I mean, everything that I love about the Final Shape can be summed up in that Excision mission. If you go and watch the gameplay of that on the channel, which I posted, and it was a little janky. I mean, it was only my second run-through of the mission, and I was still not 100% on how the mechanics work for the mission yet, because I also hadn't gotten that far in the raid yet either, and everybody else was still kind of stumbling along, and I was just there to try to get the cutscenes so I could put them on the channel. But you watch that mission, watch me play through it, or watch someone else play through it, and see that mission in full, from the opening cutscene all the way through to the ending cutscenes. And I think that fully embodies everything good about the Final Shape expansion. And really, aside from, again, that one quest that I said was excellent, the Still Hunt Exotic quest, that's really the only thing in the Final Shape that truly sticks out in my mind as memorable, is that mission, where everybody came together. We had our first and only ever intended 12-player activity where we all came together to defeat the big bad of the Light and Darkness saga, and it all just kind of came to a conclusion. We got a send-off to one of the greatest characters in Destiny history, and an actually well-executed send-off at that, and it all just kind of came to a close. And that's it. That's all that the Final Shape is for me. I don't really have much else to say about it besides all those things, because there's nothing else that's dragging me back in. I went over the campaign. I went over the subclass, Prismatic. I went over the Pale Heart. I went over the raid. All those things, you know, these are the big things that make an expansion, and none of those are excellent enough that I want to go back and play the game right now. I'm just kind of done with it at the moment. I'm probably just massively burned out, especially because, and this isn't the first time this has happened to a degree, because I have a bad habit of gearing up for a new expansion, so I go so hard at the game that I want to be ready when the expansion comes out. And at that point, I've already played so much Destiny that when the expansion's actually out, I'm like, you know what? I think I'm kind of sick of this game right now. And then I kind of taper off. But this feels a little bit different in that when I'm like, I want to play Destiny, man. I really want to play Destiny. And then I turn the game on and I'm just like, no, I really don't actually. I want to play literally anything but. And that's a different feeling, because it's not like I'm straight up avoiding the game so as not to ruin my feelings towards it like I have in the past. It's more like I cannot muster the excitement anymore. And again, I'm not saying this is a permanent thing. It's just, I think that's pretty indicative and pretty telling of my overall thoughts on this expansion, where, yeah, it's good. But man, I don't care anymore. Like, I want to move on to something else for a while. It's almost like I just want to say, you know what? I'll see y'all in Destiny 3. We still don't know if Destiny 3 is happening. Apparently, we're supposed to get this big Frontiers story event thing a year from now that's supposed to apparently, although I really do think that they're just buying time for more Destiny 3. I really doubt they're going to stick with the Destiny 2 engine for several more years. They're going to probably move on. They just probably need a few years before they can actually release that game. So I'm giving it time, but it's just the way that my head is right now. I'm just like, it's like, leave me alone. Go, Destiny, you've had your time. I need a break. We need to take a break. I need to see other people. You know what I mean? But anyway, that was a lot to talk about. That was an hour of this hour and 10-minute Let's Talk. Thank you for bearing with me for all of that. And yeah, with all that said, thank you all so very much for watching. I am going to send this off now, and I will see you guys all again for the next Let's Talk in September. So see you all in the next one.